Welcome back to the Last Days Book Club, where we are reading the book Set on Fire, with permission from the author Taurus Montgomery, a young and successful SDA pastor with a commitment to serving the youth of this generation. This story is an autobiography of his life, where as a child he grew up in the hood in Mobile, Alabama. In our last reading, we covered Chapter 21, entitled Hoop Dreams 2.0, where Taurus graduates from Oakwood with a 3.5 GPA, becomes a pastor employed in the South Central Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, and is sponsored to pursue graduate studies at Andrews University at Berrien Springs, Michigan. While he went at his graduate studies with the same intensity he applied to his undergrad studies, he hated the climate there. It was snow, snow, and more snow. He hated the snow, and even had 2 accidents because of the snow. Yet, he persevered. Graduate school was tough and really demanded a lot of study and application. At one time, he was tempted to cheat and submitted to the temptation to not read all that he claimed he read. He felt so bad about it that he had to confess and apologize to his professor, who actually took it very gracefully. The lesson he learned and taught to us readers and listeners is that no matter how badly you want to succeed at something, it must never be at the cost of your integrity. While at Berrien Springs, Taurus got a chance to go to Israel, the Holy Land, and visit the places he had read so often about in the Bible. He went on the Sea of Galilee, although he didn't walk on the water like Jesus. He visited Jerusalem, Capernaum, the Mount of Olives, and Gethsemane, and even got to swim in the Dead Sea where you can't sink. He also visited Turkey and Greece on the way back, and got to see Ephesus and Laodicea. But his greatest and most rewarding experience while in Michigan was Benton Harbor. Benton Harbor was a small, predominantly African-American inner city, like many other hood areas around the U.S. He felt right at home. He visited there to meet Walter, a Canadian pastor at Harbor of Hope Church, who had a passion for helping the youth and a true love for God. He had started a couple of programs at the church, one called Kids Zone for ages 7 through 12, where every Saturday afternoon he picked up busloads of kids from the community and brought them to the church for 75 minutes of amazing fun and activities. The kids loved it. The second was called Thursday Night Live, TNL, for teenagers, where kids from the neighborhood came every Thursday to the gym at the church to play basketball. TNL used basketball as a vehicle to engage young men in conversations about their lives and show them that they could be successful, both on and off the court. This was right up Taurus's alley, and along with Brandon, a fellow graduate student, they developed the program and worked successfully with the young people in the community. After about a year, Brandon graduated and left the responsibility of running the program to Taurus. In running the program, Taurus saw that he had to not only empower the young men of the community, but also their families. There was too much negativity, and even in the homes, he saw parents call their kids dumb, ugly, stupid, and retarded, and realized that God wants to see the hearts of the fathers turn to the children and the hearts of the children to the fathers. One event that reflected this direction that he took with the kids was to organize a mission trip for some of the youth to Guyana to build a home for an elderly widow and her children. Along with his wife and a few members of NAPS, they took 6 kids from the hood on the trip, and it was a wonderful success, being a first for the kids to travel on a plane, to leave Michigan, to go to another country, and to build a home, and also a first for ever hearing of Guyana. Finally, before he graduated, Taurus wanted to do something special so that he could reach and inspire as many kids as he could in Benton Harbor. The idea came to host the first annual TNL Basketball Classic. In 4 weeks, they put together what should have taken 4 months. There was a 6-team tournament, a 3-point shootout, a slam dunk contest, prizes, hot food, live DJ, and games for the little kids. Barbers volunteered to give free haircuts. There was a prayer table for prayer requests, a drum corps, and a drama group from Andrews. About 150 people were in attendance. And the highlight for Taurus was when he gave a 10-minute testimony of what God had done in his life. The event ended with a huge prayer circle around the court as he prayed to God to empower the city and all of its youth. Dear listeners, please don't forget that you can still purchase this book at the author's website, taurusmontgomery.com. That's TAURUSMONTGOMERY, taurusmontgomery.com, and read along with us as we pick up the story today in chapter 22, entitled Full Circle. I will instruct thee and teach thee in the way which thou shalt go. Psalms 32, verse 8. What you're about to read is still hard for me to believe. When it happened, I was in a state of shock and unbelief for a few days. At the same time, what I was experiencing was joy and relief. This story is one of those life-altering stories. It is one of those rare things in life that you'll be telling your kids and grandkids. More importantly, it's a story that taught me how far God is willing to go in order to keep you on His path towards your destiny. It all started with a phone call that led to an email in the early part of 2012. My wife and I were living in Yazoo City, Mississippi. Our first child, Jasmine, was almost a year old. I was assigned to what my denomination calls a 2-church district. Both churches were small congregations that taught me big lessons. Lintonia Chapel was located in the city where we lived. The other church, Rising Star, was in the small town of Rolling Fork, Mississippi. This was my first full-time pastoral assignment. I remember vividly the day I was installed. It was January 15th, 2011. I was fresh out of seminary. But fresher on my mind this day was a phone call. Taurus, what's up, man? That was Pastor Walter's happy-go-lucky voice. He was calling me for the second or third time to ask me the same question he'd asked prior to me graduating from the seminary. What do you think about coming back to Michigan to pastor Harbor of Hope? You can be the senior pastor and I'll be the children's pastor. You know that's my passion, man. I had already told him that I wasn't interested, emphatically, several times, for a number of reasons. The first reason was the fact that I didn't like the snow. Secondly, it was too far from my hometown, which would prevent me from taking my daughter home to see her grandparents frequently. And thirdly, I didn't like the snow. Additionally, I had just accepted a position to serve as the sports coordinator for the South Central Conference's youth department, and I was excited about that opportunity. Plus, this same conference had sponsored my master's degree, so I wanted to give them a return on their investment. And more importantly, I didn't like the snow, even though Pastor Walter persisted. So I just gave him the same answer every time. I'm good, man, but I'll pray about it and get back to you. I never prayed about it. I never got back to him. I was pretty set on staying where I was. Besides, I was learning some valuable leadership lessons from pastoring those two congregations where most of my members were older people. One giant lesson that I learned is this: no matter how good of a leader you may think you are, you cannot lead people faster than they want to be led, especially if you want them to go with you. I think this is also true with how God, who is a perfect leader, leads us. He does it with great patience. My friend, Pastor Walter, on the other hand, seemed to be lacking in the patience department, but overstocked in the determination department. He even got other people involved in asking me about coming back to Michigan. One day, I was checking my email with great anticipation to see who responded to my book cover options. I was preparing to publish this book that you're now listening to. I sent out a mock draft of the book cover to several friends to provide me with feedback. One of them was a seasoned gentleman whose opinion I highly valued on this matter because he was a published author of several books, Pastor Skip McCarthy. He was the overseer or liaison between Harbor of Hope and its sponsoring church, Pioneer Memorial. Pastor Skip's reply to my email was not what I expected. Taurus, we've been praying here about your book and our own needs and dreams at Harbor of Hope. And I have another suggestion for your book cover that I think would work better than the one you sent me, taking into account the edits I have already suggested. Prayerfully consider this. At the top of the back page, where you presently have the Taurus Montgomery info, change "They reside in Yazoo City, Mississippi" to "They presently minister at Harbor of Hope, an exciting faith-based ministry in the inner city of Benton Harbor, Michigan." We're serious. Give me a call when you get this so that we can at least talk. In prayer, Skip. That email was piercing. It was something about reading the line, "Change "They reside in Yazoo City, Mississippi" to "They presently minister at Harbor of Hope." It struck a chord that my previous conversations with Walter hadn't. All of a sudden, I was overwhelmed with a need to seriously pray about this thing. So I started praying. The powerful thing about prayer is that it connects us with the one who knows our future. Anytime I pray, I have confidence that God is going to show me what is best for me to do. Check out these promises God has made for you. Call to me, and I will answer you, and show you great and mighty things which you know not. Jeremiah 33, verse 3. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. James 1, verse 5. Believe these promises. Just as Pastor Skip had asked me, I decided to give him a call. In short, he said that my name kept coming up in their board meetings as they prayerfully considered who their next pastor might be. He asked if I would be interested, and if I would pray and fast about it. He promised that neither he nor Walter would bother me again about this. I gave him my word. This time, I was serious, because this time, it was different. I discussed this opportunity with my wife, and we both saw the need to fast and pray about it. After spending much time reflecting, praying, and fasting, we both felt that God was impressing upon us to move back to Michigan, to Benton Harbor, to become the pastor of Harbor of Hope. It's important to note here that while my wife and I were praying about this together, we were also praying individually. I think it's important for couples to have that individual connection to God. I didn't want to sway her one way or the other, which would have been difficult anyway, because my wife is such a determined woman. I recall laying in bed on a Friday night. I was staring reflectively at the ceiling, and I heard God say, "Go to Benton Harbor." It wasn't an audible, loud, thunderous voice. It was calm and peaceful. Then I went to sleep. The next morning, I told my wife. She expressed her journey with God regarding this matter, and also sensed He was leading in the same direction. That day in April, we made the decision to follow where we believed God was leading. I reached out to Skip and told him of our decision to pursue this, and that I needed time to process this with my conference president, my boss, being that they had invested so much in me. I also wanted to wait until after camp meeting. This is an annual event in my conference that thousands of church members in our region attended for spiritual renewal. One of the highlights of this 10-day event for me was being able to connect with my pastoral colleagues. There were about 70 of us. There were young pastors, middle-aged pastors, pastors with lots of gray hair, and some with no hair. The camaraderie was awesome. But when I told a few people that I may be leaving and going to Michigan, there were some who questioned my sanity. These were my friends. I know for a fact they were coming from a good place and had my best interest in mind, even when they made startling statements and asked pointed questions that caused me to think. Don't you know the retirement plan here is much better than the conference you'd be going to? Why would you go back to Benton Harbor, man? That's not a very prosperous place. Being that it's a predominantly Caucasian conference, are they going to allow you to pastor any of their predominantly Caucasian churches? Bro, I hear you. But how are you going to deal with that snow? If you move up there, you'll be a long way from home, man. Man, if I were you, I'd wait until I get ordained. Because I heard it takes forever to get ordained in that conference. I'd be lying if I said that none of those statements made me think twice about my decision. In fact, more than twice. I thought to myself several times, am I making the right decision? Is this truly what's best for me? My family? What was I thinking? Have you ever been there? That place where you decided to do something, and then when you start listening to what other people are saying about your decision, you start doubting? Let me share with you what God reminds me of when I find myself in these moments. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all they do. James 1, verses 6 through 8, the NIV. After considering all that was said, I could not help but think back to that Friday night lying in bed. I was sure that God spoke to me that night, so I pressed forward with my decision. That's what you have to do as well. Go back to the place where you made the choice the first time. No matter what others say, even when their intentions are as pure as Stephen Curry's jump shot, just as my colleagues were, you still have to go with what God is telling you to do. With that in mind, after camp meeting was over, I called up my boss, the president of the South Central Conference. At that time, it was Pastor Dana Edmond. He was always an approachable person to me, so I felt no apprehension. My only concern was that I did not want to appear unappreciative for having my education paid for and then departing. There is no policy against it, just one of those unwritten rules. While there is so much I can say about our conversation, what stood out most to me was his honesty and openness to God's leading. As much as I would love for you to stay, because I believe in your leadership potential, talents, preaching, and character, who am I to stand in the way of how God may be leading in your life? That was like a breath of fresh air for me. He encouraged me to remain prayerful about it and gave me his blessing to proceed in further conversation with Skip and the Michigan Conference, where I was potentially transferring. Like any normal job, before one is hired, there is an interview. The first interview was in July. One of the Michigan Conference officials emailed me an application that was about 10 pages long. I filled it out, and we discussed it over Skype. Everything went well until the money question was asked. One of the questions on the application asked if I had any debt. My answer, of course, was a resounding yes, to the tune of $90,000. I explained that it was my student loan debt. The ministerial director then explained that the Michigan Conference is very concerned about pastors being in debt, especially as much debt as I was in. I couldn't agree with him more. In fact, the Bible says that those who borrow become slaves to those who lend. Proverbs 22 and verse 7. I could write a book on how crazy college education prices are and the student loans industry. But I'll stick to this book for now. This conference official also shared that my debt load could potentially stand in the way of me being hired to return to Benton Harbor. I understood where he was coming from. I wasn't tripping at all. Neither was my wife, who also sat through the interview. We ended the interview with prayer. He said he was going to discuss the details of our interview with other members of their executive committee, and they would contact me soon for an official interview. He also told me to contact Sally Mae in the meantime to see what could be done to reduce or consolidate my loans. About 10 days later, I received a phone call from my interviewer. With a sense of great pleasure, he said, Taurus, I just want you to know that I shared our time with the committee, and they have agreed that we will move forward in spite of your debt. We want to fly you and your family up to Lansing for an official interview with our conference's core leadership team. I was about to interrupt him with some news, but I let him finish. He continued, I'm going to need your full name, address, and dates of birth for you and each member of your family in order to purchase the plane tickets. I then said, Well, sir, before you do that, I just want to let you know that I called Sally Mae and looked into my loans. I do not owe $90,000. It's actually $137,000. And there was silence. Then he said, Wow. I was just as shocked as he was when I first heard the number from Sally Mae. He was stunned. Taurus, you know that's a lot of debt. I'm not sure we'll be able to do this anymore. He then said, Let me call you back. Within a couple of hours, I received a phone call from Pastor Skip saying that the deal was over. He had spoken to the conference officials who informed him that they would not be able to hire me and that Harbor of Hope should begin looking for another pastor. I said to myself, Well, God, I guess I'm staying here. I moved forward like you told me to, and now the door is closed. But Pastor Skip, on the other hand, was saying something different. Well, Taurus, the truth is, we don't have a very long list of names. In fact, it's just 2. But really, it's just 1. Hey, if God can part the Red Sea, feed 5,000, walk on water, and all those other miracles, then surely he can work something out to get you up here. Let's pray right now. Pause. I don't know if you caught what he just said, what you just read. Let me be very honest with you right now. At this point, in my mind, it was over with. I really didn't feel like praying. It wasn't because I was disappointed or discouraged. I was actually satisfied that it was over. And now I could go back to focusing more on my ministry. But God will place other people in your life who believe in what God has called you to even more than you do. See, this is why you must intentionally surround yourself with people who have faith, people who believe in you and not people that try to put you down. After Pastor Skip prayed with me, he asked, Taurus, how do you plan on paying that off? That's a lot of money. I reminded him that I was writing a book, the one he'd sent me that surprising email about regarding the book cover. I plan to use the money from the sales of the book to pay my loans down. As a matter of fact, let me send you the first draft. I'd really appreciate your feedback, being that you've written several books. He agreed to look it over, so I sent it to him. To my surprise, he called me back about an hour later, saying he was just about finished with the book because he couldn't put it down. He expressed that he believed it was really a good book. I was humbled by his comments and very glad to hear it. I just wanted to call you really quick and tell you my thoughts about the book, but I'm actually about to go into a meeting shortly. But let's keep in touch, he concluded. Will do. Thanks for reading it, I said before he hung up the phone. And would you believe it? Within 2 days, he called me back again. This time, it was weird. It was a short, quick, fast conversation. He said, Taurus, I think the Lord is working something out for you. You should get a call from the Michigan conference in a few days. Talk to you later. That was it. I was like, okay. By now, I had moved on in my mind. So when the Michigan conference official who had been speaking with actually called me, I really didn't know what to expect. I got the phone call while I was in my church office. Hey, Taurus, I'm calling to book your flight, and I need your family's info, names, ages, birthdays, and your address. At this point, I'm wondering about the last conversation he and I had. I'm thinking about that $137,000 that froze him. He must have read my mind, because he asked me, have you spoken to Skip? Yes, I did. Did he tell you the details? No. What details? And that's when he dropped his bomb on me. Well, someone who is really passionate about the ministry of Harbor of Hope and has a burden for Benton Harbor has agreed to pay off all of your student loans in order for you to come up here to be the pastor at Harbor of Hope. I did not hear anything else he said after that. I was shocked, amazed, inspired, encouraged, rebuked, jubilant, and mind blown all at the same time. A flood of emotions overcame me as tears rushed to my eyes. I could not believe what I had heard. I tried to compose myself to give my new employer the information he needed. I remembered his words because they sounded familiar. The Lord really loves you, Taurus, and he has worked this miracle on your behalf. They sounded familiar because all of my life I've been told that I was different, that I had a gift, and that God has a special purpose for my life. Don't misunderstand me. God has a purpose for all of our lives, for your life just as much as mine. I'm simply highlighting the fact that have been told this over and over again. And God has confirmed it over and over again. But there's a major difference when it comes to people whom God uses more than others. They have a tendency to be more surrendered to Him and doing His will than doing their own thing. Note this: when you refuse to fully surrender yourself to God, you limit God's ability to fully bless you. I'm not perfect by far. No one is. But I can say with all honesty that I've tried to live as honest, open, and real with God as I can. I encourage you to do the same. Immediately after I hung up the phone, I fell to my knees and began to worship God with praise and thanksgiving. I asked Him to forgive me for not fully believing what He spoke to me that Friday night while I was staring at the ceiling. I should have believed, even when the door seemed shut, because Jesus said that He is able to open doors that no man can close, and close doors that no man can open. Revelation chapter 3 and verse 8. After my praise and worship session, I called my wife and shouted through the phone, "Babe, Jesus paid it all. All to Him we owe. My student loans are going to get paid off." After I calmed down, I told her the whole story. She cried. We took turns praising God, and then we prayed together. Within the next few weeks, I told all of my family and friends, and all were amazed and encouraged. I remember when I told my former boss, he was really glad to hear that. "I did believe God was leading you, but now I know for sure," he said. In jest, he stated, "As a matter of fact, if you don't go, I'm going to fire you, so you will have to go." We both laughed, and then he prayed a prayer of blessing over me. Before flying to Lansing for the official interview, we received more good news. This news came in the form of a question: what other debt do you have? We got word that not just my student loans would be paid off, but also all the debt we had. When God wants to bless you, He does it abundantly. My God is no joke. Now let's do some math. We had just bought a 5-year-old Toyota Camry for $12,500 and had only made about 5 payments on it. My wife's student loans were about $38,000. My student loans were about $137,000 and a few $100s in credit card debt. The grand total was just over $188,000, paid in full. I feel like dancing every time I think about how my God provided for my needs. The God I serve is able to do exceedingly and abundantly above all that we might ask or think. Ephesians 3:20. There is absolutely nothing too hard for Him. Jeremiah 32 and verse 27. Since the decision, I have tried to live my life by the principle of giving for the sake of giving. The natural thing to do is to be selfish. We live in a world that says, take, take, take. But I want to live my life giving to others. Because when I look at the life and teachings of Jesus Christ, I hear, give, give, give. I really can't explain why God would do this great thing for me when I know people who have 3 times as much student debt as I had. Some would say I'm lucky. Others would say it happened by chance. But the following scripture led me to a different conclusion. For God is not unrighteous to forget your work and labor of love, which ye have showed towards his name, in that you have ministered to the saints and do minister. Hebrews 6 and verse 10. There is that scattereth and yet increaseth. For there is that withholdeth more than is meet, but it tendeth to poverty. Proverbs chapter 11 and verse 24. He that hath pity upon the poor lendeth unto the Lord, and that which he hath given will he pay him again. Proverbs 19 verse 17. I think this last verse summarizes all the others. Jesus says, give, and it shall be given unto you. This is the conclusion I've come to. I'm not saying God is going to pay off all your loans, give you a mansion, and buy you a Maybach. But God will reward your sincere service to others when you do it for his glory. He will bless you in this life and the life to come. It's a principle, but he chooses the rewards and when he wants to reward you. Keep giving yourself away in service to God and others, not to be rewarded, not for applause, not to post on social media so others can think highly of you, but out of a genuine desire to be a blessing, to be hope for somebody. Speaking of being hope, I was a few weeks away from being the new pastor at Harbor of Hope. The entire trip to Lansing went very well. The interview with conference officials was great. The food at the restaurant where we ate was great. The Michigan Conference officially hired me. Now, my young family and I were officially moving to the snow that I dreaded. God has a great sense of humor, but a greater sense of purpose for our lives. Snow or no snow, I was ready to go. The end of chapter 22 of Set on Fire by Taurus Montgomery.